Halo Infinite seems to be in a bit more trouble than we thought it was, and the culprit seems to be Microsoft's pro-consumer standpoint. And finally, new rumors of a Nintendo Switch Pro have hit the internet once again, and allegedly it's coming out in early 2021. What do I think of the situation? Well, we're going to talk about it. What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games. So what was expected to be the big title of 2020 for Microsoft, the flagship game for the Xbox Series X, the reason to go out and buy an Xbox Series X on day one, Halo Infinite, of course ended up getting delayed. It's now a 2021 game, and it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on with this game. Now, when we initially saw this game, a lot of people were not very impressed with the graphics of it. Me personally, I didn't really care all that much. I just thought it looked more like Halo. It didn't really look like a next generation game. I thought the gameplay itself looked fine. Of course, then we heard about the games as a service mantra with this game. We want this game to be a 10-year Halo experience, which I'm not sold on things like that. I don't really enjoy things like that. I feel like sequels are important because you get new engines, you can improve upon things, you could really change the game. But of course, Halo Infinite was delayed until 2021 very recently, and a lot of people, myself included, were a bit upset by this. For some strange reason, people think I don't like Halo, which is really far from the truth. I don't care about the single player component of Halo, but Halo 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I remember doing LAN parties when I worked at GameStop for Halo 2, playing with the other employees there. I remember playing it on my X-Link's Kai on my original Xbox because my original Xbox was hacked. I enjoyed Halo 3, I enjoyed Halo Reach, I enjoy Halo's multiplayer. That's the reason I play those games. I just don't really talk about them all that much. But it seems like Halo Infinite could be in more of an infinite delay, no pun intended, because we got a new leak coming to us from someone over on Reset Era named Sponger. Now, allegedly this person has predicted and correctly talked about things within Microsoft before when it comes to first party titles, and they actually said some very interesting things over on Reset Era. Basically, they were considering whether to talk about it or not, but Microsoft is currently very busy with the idea of dropping Xbox One support for Halo Infinite. There's even the idea to postpone it until early 2022 on the table. It's pretty messy up there with their decisions, but they are convinced that they need to make it the best Halo game ever. The current version of Halo Infinite on the Xbox One S is nowhere near 1080p, even lower than 900p, and is having serious asset loading issues, much worse than what we saw on the PC demo of the game during Microsoft's press conference revealing Halo Infinite. So right then and there, that's definitely throwing up some red flags for me, because one thing I have said about Microsoft's stance with this whole being super pro-consumer thing is that I felt the Xbox One and having to have your next generation games also run on your Xbox One would sort of be a detriment to the development of these games, because there's going to be throttling. Now, tons of people would point to the PC game and the PC gaming industry and say, well, it's not really an issue there, but this is console gaming. I really feel like console gaming and console development is very different than what you see on PC. There is a reason that Doom Eternal has not come out on the Nintendo Switch yet, because of the fact that this game was of course built with the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and the PC in mind. Scaling games back is doable, and we have seen it done on the Nintendo Switch before. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is easy, especially when you look at what Microsoft is trying to do, because the Xbox One S is a great system. I love the Xbox One S. That is what I play my Xbox One games on. But you gotta remember, there's something called the Xbox One VCR as well, which is severely throttled compared to even the Xbox One S. And so Halo Infinite having to run on the Xbox One VCR is going to be really a technical marvel. What they're trying to do with this open world game and this engine is obviously being a bit straining on the Xbox Series X, and more so on the Xbox One S. So what is it doing to the Xbox One VCR? I feel like the thing is going to overheat and blow up and run at 5 frames per second. They're wanting to do a quality experience on all consoles, and I really feel like that's going to be a problem for Microsoft with this console generation. Halo Infinite is now at least a 2021 game. We now are thinking that it could potentially be a 2022 game. So what's going to sort of come out that's going to be a big title, a big reason to go out and buy the Xbox Series X? I really feel like this whole Halo Infinite situation is just becoming a bigger and bigger mess. Now, of course, none of this is confirmed. A lot of this is just speculation, but a lot of people are talking about it, and I always feel Like when many people are talking about a situation, there are more people out there that know something about this situation than they're really leading on to. They just don't want to talk about it and put their name out there because, well, when you put your name out there with stuff, people start to attack you. Shout outs to Jeff Grubb, buddy. I hope you're doing well with those Nintendo Direct rumors. But yeah, Halo Infinite just seems to be having a lot of problems. And honestly, I think it's a shame. I was really looking forward to playing the multiplayer in Halo Infinite this year. Now it seems like it's going to be quite a long wait with this game. And obviously the game is going to get better by having a longer development cycle, ideally, I guess. But they're obviously trying to fix this game and make this game as good as possible. But with things like games as a service, things like the Xbox One potentially holding it back, it's just a very messy situation. Let me know what you think of this situation in the comments section down below, though. Is it time for Microsoft to move on from the Xbox One? Should they just cut ties with the system, do like what we're seeing Sony do with the PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5? Or do you think this pro-consumer thing will somehow work out in their favor? Because from what we've seen so far, it's really not working out too great. And finally, here we freaking go again. Nintendo Switch Pro. How long have we been talking about this thing? It's obviously gotten very ridiculous. There was a lot of rumors about a Nintendo Switch Pro, of course, spurned on from places like the Wall Street Journal, who said, well, it's coming out in 2019, it's coming out in 2020. Of course, these years have come and gone. 2020 is starting to wrap up, and of course, there is no Nintendo Switch Pro. Spawnwave and I did a video talking about a Nintendo Switch Pro about a year or so ago by now, and we just felt like that wasn't really on the horizon for Nintendo, at least in 2019 and 2020. The Nintendo Switch itself is selling extremely well. Games are selling extremely well on it. But obviously with the rise of things like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, that power gap is going to become very highly prevalent when it comes to third-party titles. You at least want third-party developers to consider putting your games on your system, and although you can scale the games back to be on the Nintendo Switch, well, I mean, look at the Halo Infinite situation we just talked about. It's not necessarily easy, but here we are again, now talking about a Nintendo Switch Pro potentially coming in Q1 of 2021. Now, this information was talked about by Video Games Chronicle through a Taiwanese-based newspaper called Economic Daily News, who claimed that the new Nintendo Switch would enter production later this year, 2020, with a launch plan for Q1 of 2021. Now, according to the publication, the new Nintendo Switch model will feature upgraded interactivity and improved display quality. This report cites various hardware manufacturers responsible for the Nintendo Switch flash storage, Joy-Con controllers, and more things involved with the Nintendo Switch hardware itself. So it seems like a Nintendo Switch revision, which I think is a better term for this, could be potentially coming in Q1 of 2021. Now, I wouldn't go out there and expect this to be like a super beefy system. We've already seen Nintendo do 2 revisions with the Nintendo Switch. Of course, the more talked about one is the Nintendo Switch Lite, which was a cheaper entry into the Nintendo Switch library. A lot of people seem to enjoy this system. You can't hook it up to your television, so it's not really a Nintendo Switch, but it is a cheaper alternative if you want to play Switch games strictly in a portable mode. Then we saw the Nintendo Switch revision for the console itself that of course had a better battery life built in it, but this seems like it's going to be something a bit better with a better display and upgraded interactivity. I don't really know what interactivity would mean as far as how the system is going to work and how the games are going to play, but an upgraded display would be a very interesting thing. You got to remember, the Nintendo Switch is essentially built on technology from like 2015, 2016. The system released in 2017. Obviously, when you're talking about things like Tegra chips and mobile displays, these have really sort of grown over this time frame. Mobile is one of the fastest things in gaming as far as growth is concerned, with both chips, processors, and of course visual display. So a sharper Nintendo Switch screen would be a very, very interesting thing for a lot of people. Obviously, this system would have to be a little bit beefier. I wouldn't expect something like a PlayStation 4 on your Nintendo Switch, but maybe comparing it to a PlayStation 4 to a PlayStation 4 Pro is more in line of what you should expect with this. Nintendo has of course done things like this before with the Nintendo's 3DS. You had the new 3DS system that came out that actually could only run games specifically designed for that. There was only a handful of games that were released for it. Xenoblade Chronicles was one of the games that was launched alongside of the new Nintendo 3DS 3DS that would only run on the new Nintendo 3DS, but Nintendo has tapped into that power stuff before to make a slightly more improved system that is better when you are playing your older games. That was really the draw to me to the new Nintendo 3DS, was how much better the games looked from the 3DS library running on the new 3DS as opposed to the old 3DS. So I think this is a potential thing. I don't expect it to be early 2021, especially with how real world situations have been occurring, but I do think maybe a later 2021 release date would make sense. The Nintendo Switch is nearing its 4th year in production in 2021, so maybe spicing things up and beefing up this system would make it more attractive for people. Obviously, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are going to have pretty skimpy launch lineups, and it looks like the first year or so could be pretty quiet for these systems. So if Nintendo could come along and make a system that improves upon the Nintendo Switch library that is currently out there, plus takes advantage of this new Nintendo Switch Pro system, I think it would be a very interesting landscape for the world of video games. A nice little stopgap until the Nintendo Switch successor. Like I said, this is strictly just a rumor. I think it does make sense, but as far as actually happening, we kind of have to wait and see with this. Alright, so that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know what you think of everything in the comments section down below. Are you worried for Halo Infinite? Do you think it will be delayed until 2022? And the Nintendo Switch Pro. Are you tired of hearing these Nintendo Switch Pro rumors? Nintendo Switch Pro rumors are pretty much like Nintendo Direct rumors. It's what Nintendo fans sort of latch on to. They love to hear about these things and they hope they do come to fruition. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Like I said at the start, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Be sure to check out other videos on the channel. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.